This is WNZK, Dearborn Heights, Detroit, your ethnic superstation at 690 days, 680 nights.
صوت العرب من أمريكا عندما يستمع العالم إلى صوت العرب.
All right, everybody, this is Ray Hanania. It's Friday, October 25, 2024, and I'm here in a special edition of Radio Baladi on the U.S. Arab Radio Network, a guest host today on WNZK AM 690 Radio in Michigan. My guest this morning is going to be author and editor-in-chief of Arab News, Faisal Abbas, who just released his new book, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. Faisal shares what he learned while living in London, in Great Britain, or the United Kingdom, or England. We're going to talk about all those names, a lot of names for a little but powerful island in Europe that has had such a great influence on defining the civilized world. Faisal is editor-in-chief of the leading Middle East English language daily Arab News newspaper, elected as deputy chairman of the Saudi Journalists Association in January, and part of a landslide win of the Future Coalition. All kinds of stuff. We're going to talk to him, but first, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with my guest Faisal Abbas and about his book, which I tell you, I'm reading a second time because there's so many interesting, funny things in it that I really like. Anything that has anecdotes in it, okay, you know is going to be fun to read. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk with Faisal. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Hey, Michigan, let's think beyond the sink and learn where the water your family drinks every day comes from. Private wells and public water supplies allow homes across Michigan to draw water from different sources, like lakes, rivers, and groundwater. Tap into the facts about your home's water source and learn about your home's water quality to protect your family's health. Visit michigan.gov/care for MI drinking water. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
And welcome back, everybody. Again, it's Ray Hanania, guest hosting on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on Radio Baladi today, October 25th. And I got a great guest on. I've known this guy a long time. He's a phenomenal writer. I didn't know he was working on a book. Faisal Abbas. Faisal, thank you for joining us on live radio in Michigan.
Morning, Ray. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Where the heck did you find the time to write a book with all the stuff you do as editor?
Actually, Ray, you touched on a very important point. I might write a book about how I wrote a book. And, if I may praise myself a little bit,
Go ahead.
When there's a will, there's a way. So if you must know, I made it a point and as you know, I travel quite a lot. So
Yes.
On every flight, and I travel almost once every 2 or 3 days, I would finish a chapter, whether it's writing from scratch or rewriting or editing it. And that means no in-flight entertainment, no switching on the Wi-Fi, no talking to other passengers, no reading, just getting onto it. And it was my captive environment, and it worked. You also get, because of the pressure, you get a little bit more emotional on planes. So it helped with the sense of humor a little bit. It helped with the feelings a little bit. But yeah, so I literally wrote it on a plane between November and April last year.
And
This year.
I've always known you had a good sense of humor because we did a little comedy together when we were in
That's
Dubai
true.
a couple years ago. That was
That's
funny.
true.
And anything with the title Anecdotes, like I said, is phenomenal. And let me just show people the book again here. You can get in the States, you can get this on Amazon.com, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. How long did it take you to write? Before we get into some of the funny stories and anecdotes, how long did it take you to write it?
Well, as I said, November 2023 till April 2024. And then, of course, we went through with the publisher for the proofreading and copy editing, and it was published mid-June.
And thank God I
So,
have copy editors at Arab News, okay? Because I don't know how you can do everything to write a good story, to remember everything, to put everything in a cohesive manner so people understand it, make sure the jokes and the humor come across the right way, which I think you did a great job with. That's a tough thing to do. And run a newspaper that covers the world, basically Japan, Pakistan, France, London. In the book, you talk about how was London your first personal experience in the West? Um,
yes, I've of course traveled as a tourist, but as I write in the book, traveling or visiting different cities as a tourist is quite different than living there. In most circumstances, your experiences as a tourist are pleasant because you essentially deal with people who are paid to be nice to you, whether they are the hotel staff or waiters or waitresses, etc. When you move to a new city, you are dealing with people who are not paid to be nice to you, and you're going to have to make your way up through the society, solve your own problems, integrate. It's a quite different experience. But the short answer to your question is yes, London was the first Western city I've lived in as a non-tourist.
and you were there 20 years, right? As a journalist, a student, I think, correct? And then a journalist?
So actually, no, I went as a journalist and I decided to study part-time. So I was working during the day and doing my master's degree during the evening. And I'm glad I did it that way because that meant I got the most out of my experience. And it got me to mingle. One of the, I think, common denominators, I wouldn't say mistakes, but common trends that us Arabs, like many communities, when we travel, we tend to stick to our own. And I was in that box until I did my master's degree, which really helped me integrate and get to meet people, sometimes for the first time ever, from different nationalities. So, from Nigerians to Italians to Greeks to Americans to Koreans to Thai people, Chinese, Russians. Studying as well as working there really helped me get a grasp of dealing with different nationalities.
And when people write a book, they're moved to write a book by something. They just don't say, "Hey, I just moved to London. I got a job with the newspaper or the media, and I'm going to go to school. Hey, I'm going to write a book." No, you write a book because something kind of moved you to write the book. What was it that got you to say, "Hey, this is interesting. I need to share this in a book"? Was there some moment where you said, I have to put this down in paper in a book"?
Well, first of all, absolutely. I think the biggest motivators for creatives, it's quite interesting because it's either love or hate, right? These are the
Right.
two biggest triggers that could drive you to do something. But with me, there's an added element of the curiosity of being a journalist. And it is fascinating how sometimes there is more than what meets the eye. when you know the backstory of a building or a dish or a cultural habit, it's a fascinating thing. It's an anecdote that you probably want to share with people. Um, and there's so many of them in London, which is unique in quite a special way. Not many cities, I have to say, Ray, not many cities have been written about as much as London, and
Right.
still, with all the books that have been written about it, whether by American visitors, whether by Arab visitors, whether by Russian visitors, they still don't do it justice. This is a city that is unlike anywhere else in the world in terms of its diversity, its inclusion, the number of nationalities, the languages that are spoken to it. I think a lot of people compare it to New York, but I think it's a lot richer in terms of culture. It's a lot. It's much more. I mean, for us, it's closer to the Middle East, as you can imagine, and there's a lot more history ties with London than we have with New York.
Yeah, and of course, I've been to London with my wife Allison a number of times, and England. We traveled around there. I love France, though; that's my favorite place. But we took the Channel, the train over to London. We spent a few days there, and it was rainy, it was chilly, it was foggy, smoggy. There's so many things that were peculiar. The bobbies, I guess, are the police. Is that it? They don't carry guns, do they? And so there are all these interesting things. And yet I thought I knew everything about London until I read your book. And by the way, I want to read you dedicated the book, but you said something in your dedication that really hit me and said, okay, this told me this is going to be a great book. In his dedication, Faisal wrote, he was dedicating it to this, to that, and then he ended it by saying, and to anyone who's had to constantly live with a red line under their name on Microsoft Word. And that, I bet there are a lot of people out there that can identify with that, and we just take it for granted, but you put it in print. I don't think I've ever read that anyplace.
Well, I mean, as I said in that dedication, that only means that you're meant to be special, so make the most of it.
Yes, we
So
are.
you could look at the glass half full or glass half empty. I decided to look at the glass half full. Let me unpack some of the things you
Yes.
mentioned there, and it's very interesting. And I'm glad we're doing this on a radio show in the United States because, yes, the book is about an Arab living in London. But what your audience needs to know that we in the Middle East, I'm sure a lot of them already know this, but we, especially people who have grown up in the 70s, 80s onwards, the predominant culture was American, not British, unlike our fathers, our grandfathers who lived during the colonial era. Or the traces of the colonial era who have been very much influenced by the French or the British. Most of the influence today is American. There's a lot of American culture influences that you can read in the book. So, and I hear this quite a lot from people who read the book is that, it's half of the book is about Arab impressions or anecdotes of the United Kingdom, but the other half is comparing the United States with the UK. And the reason why we do that is because we take things for granted, starting with trivial things such as the words we use. For example, we do not say chips, we say French fries. We don't say flat, we say apartment. So we don't call for the bill, we say, could you give me the check at a restaurant? But there is a lot of differences which I touch on between the United States and the United Kingdom, as a very famous quote goes. It's it's two very different cultures or two very different nations united by a single language. But yeah, so when you talk about the weather, I think one of the stereotypes of the Brits is how much they are fascinated and obsessed about the weather. I mean, the most watched the most watched program on television is the weather forecast, right? But that's an anecdote in itself, because unlike America, where you come from Chicago, so you're quite used to snow and strong wind. People who live in Florida get a hurricane every few months. None of that happens in the UK. I mean, if anything, the weather in the United Kingdom actually is very boring and predictable. It's either, gray and miserable, or sunny and delightful.
And
It
yet they
just
like,
does.
and yet they like to talk about it all the time, right?
Half of the conversations is about the weather.
And you pointed out it's a safe haven discussion, basically, for the
Oh yeah,
Brits, right? It's
yeah,
safe to talk about that. Unlike here in the U.S., where we get into fights and arguments and call each other names because we talk about contentious things like politics or the economy or crime. I might start doing that. I think I'm going to just start talking about the weather just to calm things down here. Maybe we can start a trend in the U.S.
Um, I don't know whether you'll be successful, because
We
everything
won't.
seems to be politicized now in the
Yes, it
United
is.
States. But with regards to the UK, as I said, you asked me about the trigger or what made me interested in writing the book. I don't just name or kind of account for anecdotes, but I dig deeper. So what you rightly pointed out about the weather, I've actually went and saw an anthropologist, a famous anthropologist by the name of Kate Fox. She wrote a book called Watching the English, and you're very right. The weather for the British, who, as you know, are very private people and cherish their privacy, the weather serves as a safe topic. So let's say you're in a bar or a restaurant or a public sphere, and you see somebody that you would like to talk to, whether it's a gentleman or a lady. You can't just go up to them and say, "Hey, or hey, beautiful," or "Hey, gorgeous," or "Can I buy you a drink?" You simply cannot do that in British etiquette. I mean, what you're meant to do is, go and say, "Hey, hot weather today," or "What a beautiful day it is," or "Quite miserable today, the weather." And then the other person is like, "Yes, it is, isn't it?" And
Ah.
that's a cue that they would like to continue the conversation. But see, you've
The
not
secret
embarrassed
of a
yourself.
pickup line in England, okay?
Yeah, but you see, you've not embarrassed yourself or embarrassed the other person by telling you
True.
that they don't want to talk to you.
Right.
So these are the small kind of social codes that are really fascinating. And as I said, the book is equally about differences between the United States and the United Kingdom, as it is about the United States, as it is between the United Kingdom and the Arab world.
Do you, because we compare the U.S. to Great Britain, London, United Kingdom, we can talk about that too. We're so contentious and argumentative here in the U.S. We've been polarized. People are on one side, people are on the other side. They're yelling at each other, calling each other names in the U.S. over politics and all kinds of issues. It seems like in London, there's kind of a insistence on being respectful. I may disagree. If I get the impression that people in London and visitors who go there and live there, they feel this pressure to be respectful, or it's ingrained in them to be respectful. Is that the case, or
Um,
is there
it's
a lot of
much.
arguments and
It's the art of the argument, right? I mean, I think people in both countries can be very respectful or disrespectful, but what the British do much more eloquently or different than the United States is the art of beating around the bush. So if you want me to compare, I would say Americans are very direct, versus the British, who try everything but being direct.
diplomatic?
Diplomatic, cryptic, keep playing it safe all the time. Not
Sherlock
giving.
Holmes trying to get you to see that they're thinking it through. Yes,
Yeah.
we just scream at you in the U.S. We just yell and scream. But over there, it seems like there's a little politeness, this arrogant politeness, I think, sometimes you get over there.
It's trying to, as they say, keep your. I mean, the other thing is people are like in the Arab world, in the US, we are very opinionated. And in the UK, the tendency is to keep your opinion to yourself. And even when you do say it, you try to say it in the least offensive way possible. When somebody tells you, I don't quite agree, in the United Kingdom, that would translate to, get the hell out or something like that in the United States or something like that. So,
When you were traveling through, and now you were there 20 years, you're meeting a lot of people. They know you as an Arab, so I don't think they'd hide this fact. Are they still mad at us in America for, not allowing them to control us in 1776, that we broke from them and beat the heck out of them? We won. We won. We won. We won. Are they mad at us, or do they just kind of suppress that and move on?
well, the tendency is to suppress that and move on, but I wouldn't say mad, because a British person wouldn't get mad. They just hold grudges.
Oh.
And I think there's a hidden grudge that is held, which is translated into form of mockery of anything the United States does.
Yeah.
And it's very American to be proud and big, and even American tourists in London, they are kind of constantly mocked for being very loud. So the way the British get back on that is, they constantly mock the American tendency to go bigger and better and badder. And so there is that element, and there's a conscious determination, which is fascinating, because Britain too is becoming very Americanized, but there's a sort of a constant battle to tell the people that we are different. This is the British way and this is the American way. But yet there's an invasion of McDonald's, Starbucks, American terminology, American habits coming into.
We have a way of imposing ourselves on people, whether they want us or not, here in the U.S. We just do it, unfortunately. And you're right. The British are, I think, more respectful. When I was there, I always felt comfortable. And I think maybe that's why we see so much diversity in Britain, so many ethnic groups. I mean, big communities. It's very welcoming. Of course, and we can get into the United Kingdom and Britain and Great Britain and Britannia. But your book, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile, it's a respectful look at Britain, right? You weren't being critical. An anecdote, maybe a little embarrassing for the British sometimes, but it was respectful. It came across in a very respectful manner.
I mean, the intention isn't to belittle any culture. Especially coming from an Arab, we spend a lot of our time fighting this disrespect and this discrimination, right. And it's not proper to do it to other people. But what it is, as I said, it's curiosity to try to understand why people behave in a certain way. Why is Britain called Great Britain? Many Arabs believe that's because of the empire, and that's because they ruled half of the world, etc. And on the contrary, once you dig, you find out that it has nothing to do with that. Great Britain is actually the full name. Of course, it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Great Britain, as opposed to Little Britain, is Great Britain is the combined islands of England, Wales, and Scotland. And because those are the bigger islands, it's called Great Britain, versus Little Britain, which is the historic name for the Irish island, if I may. So many people confuse that. And if you ask, if you go down the street and do some vox pops with people, they're like, yeah, this has to do with the empire. That's because they thought they were great, but they're not great anymore. But actually, it has nothing to do with that. And
it's more geographical in size, as opposed
absolutely.
To right. That was an interesting aspect. I didn't know that. I always thought it was part of an arrogance. I mean, you create an empire around the world, you have to sell yourself, and you want to tell people we are great. but it turns out after reading that, no, it's just a region of their empire that's great, and then there's the other
That's
part that's smaller, not so great.
well, that's not Britain. That's another English-speaking
Yeah,
country
it's
who
too
might have.
confusing.
No, I mean, there's another English-speaking country who might be having a president very soon who will be saying our country is great or
Right.
making it great again.
Making it great
But
again.
but that's not Britain.
That's funny. We're talking with Faisal Abbas. He is the author of a book, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. You can get that on Amazon.com. It's not a deep, dissertation. It's actually humorous. It's an easy read. I breezed through it. I'm going through it a second time because there's so much entertainment in it. Humor is the best thing for people's health. So I always tried to read humor. And by the way, if you want to call in, our call-in number is 248-557-3300. Faisal has a wide expertise. I mean, he's the editor-in-chief of the Arab News, which is the leading English language newspaper in the Gulf. And you can read that at arabnews.com. But it was so interesting to see this other aspect. I've worked with Faisal for many years as a writer, with him as editor. And then to see this, I've always seen his humorous side, but it comes out in the book. And I think that was really fun. It made it fun to read, Faisal. How is the book doing? I mean, it came out, about 3-4 weeks ago, right?
So it came out in June in London. It was released last month in Saudi Arabia at the Riyadh Book Fair, out for public release next week. Actually, I'm doing an event at the British Embassy. After that, I'm doing the second leg of the book tour, which takes me to Dubai. And at some point next year, early next year, I would love to come to the United States because we're getting a lot of demand from the book. It was completely unexpected, but
Good.
Here we are talking about it on an Arab American network. So clearly, some people might be enjoying it. So I would love to come to the States and talk a little bit more about it. We are just about to. We've released the ebook, and we are currently working on the audio book, which hopefully will be ready by the time for the last leg of the book tour, which will be in the United States next year.
Now, I've always been a big audio. I was a big print book reader. And over the last, I'd say 15 years, I switched over, started doing audiobooks. But lately, I've been going back to actually reading the book. And I find that the audiobook, you get distracted sometimes, but reading the book, you actually have to focus on it and blur everything out. And it really is a much better experience. I think you got to get the audiobook out there because that's the way the world is going. But for other people, I think that they should just get the book. It's not very big. It's 189 pages, packed with anecdotes. We're going to take a quick break. Maybe we can talk about a few of the anecdotes that you observed, because there were too many for me. I wrote a story about it. There were too many for me. If I had written all of them, it'd be just like rewriting your book. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to leave some of the good stuff in there. We are talking with Faisal Abbas. He is the author of Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile, which is available on Amazon.com. Great graphic, too, by the way. I love that. The caricature. He's a good guy. Faisal is just has this great temperament, great attitude, understands English, Arabic, from the Middle East. He lived in London for about 20 years, I believe. And during that time, he was collecting notes mentally and on paper. As any journalist and writer would do, we write everything down for future sake and keep journals. And he put it into this great book of anecdotes, funny stories, things that I'd never heard of, and I've been to London and England many times. We're going to take a quick break here at WNZK AM 690 Radio on the U.S. Arab Radio Network, Friday, October 25, 2024. And when we come back, we'll continue a conversation with Faisal Abbas, editor-in-chief of the leading Middle East English language daily Arab News, and the author of the new book, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Every Thursday in Michigan at 5 p.m., award-winning columnist and journalist Ray Hanania hosts the Ray Hanania Radio Show, presented by the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 Radio and brought to you by Arab News Newspaper. This season's focus is on the U.S. presidential elections. Will it be Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or Dr. Jill Stein? Veteran political analysts and elected officials will join as guests. Join us every Thursday at 5 p.m. on WNZK AM 690 Radio for the Ray Hanania Radio Show, presented by the U.S. Arab Radio Network, a special on the presidential elections. Shows are rebroadcast each Monday at 5 p.m. Get to know more about the show at ArabNews.com. Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most, and make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
And welcome back to Radio Baladi at the special segment that I'm hosting for Layla El Husseini at the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 Radio live in Michigan and the region around Michigan. My guest this morning on radio is Faisal Abbas. We're talking about his new book. I mean, we could talk about a lot of things because Faisal knows a lot. He's been a reporter, a journalist for many years. Almost as long as me, although I've been a lot older than you, Faisal. And he knows a lot. And I've always found him to be very fair in his approach to issues. You know, a lot of people get contentious, but I don't know. I've never really seen you contentious. I don't know if I want to see you contentious, Faisal. But you have this very interesting approach to facts and anecdotes, and I think it comes across in the book. Your feelings don't get in the way of understanding the anecdote. Out of all the things that you have observed of during your 20 years in England, what was there one? Tell us a few that really left an impression on you and that made it in the book. And then, if you can, tell us about a few that didn't make it in the book that you decided, nah, I better not include those.
Well, look, first of all, there's being Arab, we are in general, hot-blooded, quite emotional, quite vocal, which is the complete opposite of what being British is all about. This gets complicated when you talk about romantic relationships or doing business. And I think there's a whole chapter called Romeo and Juliet, about the difference between being Arab and being British. And, I cite one of, the famous British Iranian comedian Omid Jalili. And, Iranians share that aspect of being hot-blooded with us, Arabs. And, there's this whole scene where, he is with his English girlfriend and, he's like, baby, I love you. I'm going to write you a poetry. I'm going to cut off my hand and write you a poetry with my blood. Here, take it. And he starts yelling. And his English girlfriend goes like, thanks, and just takes it and walk away. And that's very true. The way we express emotions is very different. I think the British are masters at the art of the gesture. So, writing a note or writing a postcard or something like that is one of the most romantic things you can do, and perhaps we don't share that sentiment, being Arab. But also, for example, you need to remember that the British weren't always this quote unquote cold, and I think that is an aspect or a characteristic that both Americans and Arabs see the Brits as. In fact, as I mentioned in the book, apart from the Russians, the Brits are the most popular nationality to cast Hollywood villains from. It's almost every Hollywood movie that has a villain has to have a British accent, including, for example, in The Lion King.
So the villains are British, in other words, right?
Yes, they have a British accent because they're seen as cold and distant. Even in The Lion King, if you remember, I don't quite remember the characters' names, but Mufasa, the Lion King's father, has a brother called Scar. One has an American accent and one has the British accent. Guess which one is the evil one?
Right, of course. But here in America, when you hear somebody with a British accent, you and you have kind of a British accent, Faisal, you automatically think, oh, this guy's well educated. He's smart. I'm going to listen to him. You listen to an American with that Southern drawl or that Chicago D's, dumbs, and does accent. We don't get the same sense of educational, erudite respect that the British do. And I think that puts the British and the Arab world closer together because there is a sense of education that comes through the way they talk, as opposed, and Americans very educated. I'm not saying they're not, but we can be kind of boorish. We can be mean and uneducated in the way we approach things. But I always found, I hear somebody with a British accent, I stop. And I go, oh.
Well, but you need to remember there are several British accents. What you're referring to is the Queen's English or the King's English, which is known as the stiff upper lip English, which tends to signify that or indicate that this person went to a public school, which in Britain means a private school. Don't ask; it's in the book. You can find out. But that means you received a certain level of education where they emphasize a certain way of pronouncing letters. The complete opposite of that is, for example, what's called the Cockney slang. And where half of the letters are indistinguishable from others, and that does not, even if the person is very well educated, it does not give the impression of somebody who is equivalent of hearing somebody rap in the United States, even though if they went to Harvard and they're speaking in rap, that.
Well, listen, I find it hard to understand sometimes because I subscribed at one time to BritBox, which is the British streaming service of TV shows. They have a great series of police, constable investigation programs, and I love that kind of thing. I'm always fascinated with it, but I have such a hard time when they're talking, understanding what the heck are they talking about. Simple words have dual meanings with them. It was very difficult, so I had to unsubscribe. I couldn't enjoy myself because I found myself fighting to write down and say, okay, I'd pause the show, I'd scribble it, I'd have to look it up and say, what did he just say? It has no meaning. It's such a different context here in the U.S. Tell us a little bit more, if you don't mind, about some 189 pages. It's filled with anecdotes that are very interesting.
I mean, I'm curious, what was your favorite, Ray?
Well, my favorite obviously was the you talk about the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think it was. I mean, there's so many that here, you put me on the spot because I'm trying to prepare the show. I didn't really focus. I should have picked one. But I really enjoyed it as a whole. I went through the whole book, and like I said, I started reading it a second time because I want to appreciate, and grab some more of the anecdotes because they're really very good. This obsession with, I think one of the things that struck me was you talk about how the British have this obsession with privacy. and yet they have the largest number of closed circuit TV cameras in the world in their city. Everything is on CCTV, right? It's
I
everywhere.
mean, in a way, it's this is what the anecdotes are. I mean, it's a country of contradictions.
Right.
Yes, so they make a huge fuss, go in massive protest to stop the government issuing ID cards for citizens and residents because they consider it an intrusion on their privacy. But nobody minds the number of essentially there's a video of you from the moment you leave your home till the moment you come back in the evening. um, it's a country that has something called the Freedom of Information Act, but also the Official Secrecy Act. So on one hand, any citizen or media outlet or body can demand that the government releases information, but at the same time, the government can deploy an Official Secrecy Act and say, no, we can't release that information. So it's really fascinating to measure all of these or compare and contrast all of these contradictions. And as I said, I mean, there are contradictions within the UK itself. I mean, when you consider the history of the country, these are England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland or Northern Ireland, and you consider that each one of them has a different language and a different church, and that most of their history have been fighting. You wonder whether this, the term "the United Kingdom" is actually accurate, because there's nothing united about it. It just happens to be. Yet somehow it works. The comparison between the United Kingdom and the United States, for example, on the levels of decency. Up until recently, even minors could buy a daily newspaper, a tabloid, which would have an image of a very attractive topless woman. And, a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old can buy that like they buy candy from a corner shop, right? That is unimaginable in the United States. At the same time, Britons say, well, how come that's a problem? But, you go into a movie theater in the United States, or you buy a video game where somebody actually takes out a machine gun and blows somebody's brains out, and that's okay for children to watch.
Yeah.
So
a lot of violence on U.S. TV.
Yes.
Well, and then I always look at labels. When people label things like United States or United Kingdom, it's because they're filling a void in the reality that's not united. So they have to tell you we're united, because if they didn't label it, you would never see a United States. 50 states that fight with each other all the time are far from united. Is that the same in the United Kingdom? Is it like really just kind of a label that brings people that are not so united together, or is the United Kingdom really united?
I mean, look, if you look at things like the Scottish referendum and the history with Ireland, I mean, it's a journey. Nothing should be taken for granted. There's a lot of history there. But there is no doubt that at one point, this monarchy was a great empire, and they had incredible technology and bureaucracy. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to run an empire where literally the sun did not set. It's from the Far East to all the way where you are in the United States. Imagine, and they did it quite well for a very long time. So I take nothing away from them. Of course, my favorite invention of all time is the phone booth. The red phone booth in the London street. And you just have to look at it and wonder how civilized the British were. When you look at people with smartphones today yelling next to you on the bus or on the train, and like you almost want to turn to the guy and excuse me, I really don't care about your problems with your wife. Or
why do I have to listen to it? Right?
Yeah, I'll be thankful if you spare me the details. Or when you go to a public restroom and you hear somebody in the next cabin flirting with his girlfriend in a public restroom, and I almost want to take the phone and call his girlfriend. I was like, "Do you know where he's calling you from?"
We're talking with Faisal Abbas. He's the author of the new book, Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. It really, it does help the reader to understand Great Britain, the United Kingdom, his life in London for 20 years. We're going to take a quick break, our last break, and then when we come back, I don't know, Faisal, maybe I can get you to talk about some of the big news around the world. You're one of the biggest editor-in-chiefs I know. So I don't. It would be unfair if I didn't ask you to talk about some of the big serious issues, if that's okay, or you want to just
Absolutely.
relax and do the anecdotes.
No, let's talk politics. Absolutely.
All
It
right,
is an election year.
We'll do that for a few minutes. I'm Ray Hanania here at WNZK AM 690 Radio in Michigan on a special edition of Radio Baladi. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking with my guest, Faisal Abbas, who is the editor-in-chief of the leading Middle East English language daily newspaper, Arab News. I'm Ray Hanania. We will be right back right after these messages.
The U.S. Arab Radio Network is the largest Arab and Muslim radio network in America, broadcasting throughout the Midwest region, Monday through Friday on WNZK AM 690. U.S. Arab Radio features Arabic and English language programming on every topic, from health, food, and culture to government, politics, and legal issues. Listen live to U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, and Windsor, Canada on WNZK AM 690. And in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on WDMV 700 AM. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. So join us every day on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and check out our website at www.arabradio.us. ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com. News that matters to you.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
And welcome back to Radio Baladi. I'm Ray Hanania. You know, that Ziyad ad reminded me of a good friend of mine, Nimer Ziyad. I knew him when he was a kid. His father, Ahmed, opened up the Syrian bakery in 1966 in Chicago. It was the only place you could get pita breads, Middle Eastern bread, Middle Eastern spices. I remember when I was a kid, my mother, we would travel to the Middle East, and she'd bring empty suitcases on the plane going there, and then coming back, it would be filled with mluchia and tahini and hummus. And we go to the airport, and the people at the airport would look at us and go, "What the heck are you bringing back? You have a store?" She goes, "No, I need these to cook the food I like to make. I cannot make the food without these ingredients." So she went through that every time we would come back. So Nimer passed away. He did so much to bring Middle Eastern food here in the United States. He passed away about 8 weeks ago, and we definitely miss him. I'm on the line with me here at Radio Baladi on WNZK is Faisal Abbas. We do have a few minutes left, about 8 minutes. Faisal, the politics in the U.S. is so combative, isn't it, compared to politics in other areas? I mean, when we get it, a lot of people like sports. I don't. For me, the real sport is politics. If there's no politics, I don't know what I would be doing. And I think I was raised that way in the United States. But what do people outside of the United States think when they see the politics of the United States? What do you see?
I think I fully agree with you there. It has gotten a lot more aggressive in the last 10 or 15 years. And it's almost, people have a football team or a sports attitude towards it, which is, I need to destroy the other side. But that's not, shouldn't be what politics is about. I mean, politics is about finding common ground and trying to work with the other side despite your differences. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. And these United States from afar look very, very divided. And that is not good. That is not good internally within the United States. And that is not good externally outside of the US, where we feel there's a diminishing foreign policy power. And perhaps what's happening now in the Middle East and the U.S. inability to contain it is a big example. Unfortunately, and I'm not saying this is the only reason, but it is an election year. So the incumbent is very cautious not to do anything that would cost them the election. And the contender is waiting for them to do any move. In a way, if they are pro or against Israel, they would use it against them. And instead of both parties saying, you know what, we're going to put politics aside and agree that there's no greater mission in life or greater value than saving people or stopping bloodshed. That is not the kind of politics we are seeing today, unfortunately. But that is the reality of the world we live in. And I just need to say, to be fair to the United States, that is not a problem of America on its own. That is almost a worldwide problem. And you feel it more in America because there's a lot more freedom. But that means a lot more ability for social media to meddle and magnify, unfortunately, people's worst traits or sides.
Yeah, and are you surprised that America is almost equally divided among voters? You got 80 million people on one side and 80 million people on the other side between the two candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. That just seems like it can't be a coincidence, right? It has to be the result of the more intense anger, conflict between the two sides that kind of averages out. I'm not sure how to explain it. You would think in politics, one person would be really popular and the other wouldn't. Maybe they get 80% of the vote. The other person would get 20%. This election, as the last few elections have been, are so close. What does that say about our country, America? As an observer from an anecdote looking at us, you got to do an anecdote about the United States. Can you do that?
I would need to spend a bit more time in America to be able to be fair to all sides. But on your observation, you're absolutely true. And look, I interviewed Fareed Zakaria when he came here to Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago to talk about his book, Age of Revolutions. And he explains it very well. And he says, politics used to be, when we talk about right wing and left wing, or in the American context, the Democrats versus the Republicans, it used to be about financial or economic policy, right? So, and usually you're able to find a middle ground because one party believes in huge or large government involvement and the other one believes in limited government role. Somewhere in the middle, you can say, fine, you can spend this much, but not that much. We reach a compromise and we move forward. But when politics becomes about gender, as it is today, or religious views, or black versus white, men against women, immigrants versus people who believe that they are, the sole, or they have the exclusive right to the land, then there's no margin or there's no area for coming together or finding a middle ground. Then it's a me against you situation, and the winner takes all. And that's a very bad situation. That's a very tough situation to be in politics, because you even if you win, you lose, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
There's no point winning with
Right.
50% of the vote and
A pyrrhic
alienating
victory.
50. Yeah, and you alienate 50% of the country.
Yeah.
You're the president of the United States, not you're president of half of the United States.
Right. It's very, I'll tell you, it's very divided. And you reminded me of something that is that's impactful on Arabs and the image of the Arab world in the United States. I was giving a speech a few years ago, and one of the things I said was we don't have a lot of Arab Americans in journalism. And somebody stood up in the audience and said, "No, you have Fareed Zakaria. He represents the Arab world." And I said, "No, Fareed's not an Arab. He may sound like an Arab, he may look like an Arab, but he's not an Arab. He's a great journalist. I know him. He's a phenomenal person, but there are no Arabs." The lack of understanding in the U.S. I always say that we're the most educated people in the world, but the least educated about the world. We stereotype everything, when we look at things, and it's a tough thing. You got 2 minutes. Any final thoughts about the book? Just to maybe finish up on that. Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile. We brought Faisal on to talk about this. It's available at Amazon.com. I urge you to get it. It's very humorous, very insightful, fascinating facts in it that you're going to want to read. Nothing that things that I didn't know, and I thought, and I'm the kind of person that thinks he knows everything. Faisal, any final thoughts on the book for the audience out there?
Oh, not at all. As I said, it is equally comparing Arab anecdotes of England or Britain to American ones, because, as I said, we spent a lot of our time being under the influence of American culture. So a lot of the book is, I grew up understanding or grew up with a certain culture of understanding of the world that was very much shaped by MTV, by Hollywood movies, by American music, and the impact that has had on me. I even talk about it like I don't have such a strong American accent, but when I went to the United Kingdom, I had a very strong American accent, and
Yeah, you do.
and my British friends, after they became friends and they felt at ease to tell me their opinions, like, you sounded very arrogant when you first came. I was like, why? It's like, because you had a very strong American accent.
I want a British accent. I want to see if I can get a British accent. I don't know if I could ever do that. But Faisal, listen, I have to.
We should do it as a special offer with the book. Get the book and download the special accent or something.
All right, listen, Faisal Abbas, my friend, editor-in-chief of Arab News at arabnews.com if you want to go there and visit. Author of Anecdotes of an Arab Anglophile who was so gracious to spend time with us here at the special edition of Radio Baladi on the U.S. Arab Radio Network. I'm Ray Hanania. Faisal, thank you again so much for all that you do, all your insight. You're somebody I look up towards as a journalist because you're always so good, so fair, and so thorough. Thank you so much, Faisal.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Ray. Thank you very much.
All right. And everybody, this show is broadcast on Facebook, on the U.S. Arab Radio on Facebook, so you can watch this if you just tuned in recently. And we'll also have it on YouTube. Just look up Faisal Abbas, Ray Hanania, and U.S. Arab Radio Network. I am Ray Hanania. My website is hanania.com. You want to read all my insights, my columns, and keep up with all the things I'm doing. And we want to thank Layla Hosseini and Mike Chubka for all the work that they do to keep this radio show on the air, informing our community about all the great things that are happening. I'm Ray Hanania. Have a great month. We will talk to you again. Oh, and don't forget to listen on Thursdays at 5 p.m. And Mondays at 5 p.m. to my show, the Ray Hanania Radio Show, which is focused on U.S. politics. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.